Welcome to this explainer. If you're a CIPM Level 2 candidate with roughly 30 days left until your 2026 exam, listen up, because your study strategy needs an immediate, laser-focused shift right now. Level 2 is definitely not just a continuation of Level 1. It is a massive step up in complexity. So over the next few minutes, we're going to walk through a clear, totally authoritative roadmap focused entirely on official CFA Institute curriculum weights. We want to make absolutely sure your final month is spent exactly where it matters most.
Okay, let's dive right into the game plan. We'll kick things off with the CIPM Level 2 exam itself, then tackle Priority 1 Manager Selection. After that, we'll look at Attribution and Appraisal, followed by Ethics, JIPS, and Measurement. And finally, we'll map out your final 30-day strategy.
All right, let's get right into Section 1, the CIPM Level 2 exam.
I want you to really consider this number for a second. 44%. That was the pass rate for the most recent Level 2 exam administered in March 2026. Now, I'm not bringing this up to scare you, no way. It's really just to emphasize exactly why a highly focused, application-based strategy is absolutely mandatory for this upcoming September window. And honestly, the exam format itself explains why that pass rate sits where it does. You're facing down 80 questions over 3 pretty grueling hours. But here's the real kicker. The format heavily relies on complex scenario analysis, not just your run-of-the-mill, straightforward multiple-choice questions. That means just rereading the curriculum cover to cover, yeah, that's not going to cut it anymore. You are expected to actually apply tools and inputs in some seriously complex investment decision-making situations. So, moving on to Section 2, Priority 1, which is Manager Selection. Manager Selection represents a massive 30% of the curriculum weight. Think about that. It is the single largest domain on Level 2, which means it absolutely demands the lion's share of your remaining revision time. You simply cannot pass this exam if you're weak in this specific area. It's a deal breaker. The crucial point here is understanding the nuances perfectly. The 2026 learning outcomes are pretty extensive. You've got to be able to evaluate if a manager is actually following their claimed philosophy. And critically, you need to deeply understand the difference between Type I and Type 2 errors when you're dealing with hiring and continuation decisions. Like mistakenly firing a skillful manager versus keeping an unskilled one, you need to know those scenarios inside and out. Another key distinction you're expected to completely master is returns-based versus holdings-based style analysis. The learning outcome statements explicitly require you to differentiate between these methods. You're also going to need to be totally comfortable evaluating managers using measures like upside and downside capture, drawdown duration, and grasping tricky issues like style drift and pure active risk. Okay, let's shift gears to Section 3, Attribution and Appraisal topics. When we put performance attribution and performance appraisal together, we're looking at another huge chunk of the exam. Each of those carries a 15 to 20% weight. And the 2026 curriculum goes way beyond just your basic allocation and selection effects. You need to be ready to calculate and interpret attribution for some pretty complex portfolios. We're talking ones with short positions, futures options, and even multi-currency components. Now, fixed income attribution is an area you absolutely cannot neglect. The curriculum clearly identifies 3 major decomposition approaches: exposure decomposition using duration, yield curve decomposition using duration, and yield curve decomposition using full repricing. But hey, a quick word of warning here. Do not just memorize these terms. Practice the actual calculations, but more importantly, ask yourself, what do these outputs actually say about the underlying investment decisions? Because just memorizing terminology isn't going to save you when you're faced with a complicated scenario. And that naturally brings us over to performance appraisal, where the ultimate question always comes down to, does this performance reflect genuine skill, or was it just pure luck? To truly analyze an active manager's skill, you've got to know how to evaluate the impact of benchmark selection, factor selection, and even how cash holdings influence the final conclusions you draw about a manager's true capabilities.
All right, moving right along to Section 4, Ethics, JIPS, and Measurement.
For ethics, which carries a really hefty 15% weight, there is a critical directive from the CFA Institute for 2026 candidates. Listen closely to this one, guys. You must study only the ethics curriculum specifically provided for your 2026 exam. Do not try to replace it with the 12th edition of the Standards of Practice Handbook. You have to base your prep strictly on the newly assigned material. It's a common trap, so don't fall for it.
Rounding out the technical domains, we have JIPS sitting at 10 to 15% and performance measurement at 5 to 10%. For JIPs, you really need to practice situational applications. Don't just try to commit rules to memory. Know exactly when a portfolio is discretionary and understand all the little nuances of composite construction. For measurement, just make sure you can mathematically handle complex portfolios like long-short, short extension, and unhedged multi-currency returns.
Finally, let's jump into Section 5, your final 30-day strategy.
Here is your tactical countdown to test day. In days 30 to 21, you need to close your biggest knowledge gaps, starting right away with manager selection. Days 20 to 11 are all about application and question solving. Days 10 to 4, those are dedicated exclusively to mock exams. And your final 3 days are for a highly targeted review. This sets up a really clear, authoritative path straight from today right through to exam day.
During that initial biggest gaps phase, I really want you to remember this direct quote from the CFA Institute. Every exam question is explicitly based on one or more learning outcome statements. This proves exactly why using the official learning outcome statements as a literal line-by-line checklist is hands down the smartest move you can make right now.
As you transition over into the application phase, remember that the CFA Institute gives CIPM candidates access to over 1,700 practice questions in their learning ecosystem. Use these official questions strategically to expose your weaknesses. Don't just try to rack up a high question count for the sake of it. When you get a question right, stop for a second and ask yourself why the other alternatives were wrong. That's where the real learning happens.
When you hit that mock exam phase in days 10 to 4, classifying your errors is actually way more valuable than whatever your raw mock score ends up being. Use these exact steps. Was it a knowledge gap? Was it a calculation error? Did you just misread the scenario? Systematically identifying exactly how you're slipping up is the only way to correct your course before the real thing.
In your final 3 days, whatever you do not try to relearn the entire curriculum. Review your weak spots, sure, but more importantly, check the dedicated official 2026 CIPM Curriculum Errata Notice. It is absolutely vital that you do this so you don't accidentally rely on corrected formulas or faulty examples when you're sitting for the actual test.
Finally, I want to leave you with this thought. CIPM Level 2 is ultimately all about application. Consider imperative action verbs like calculate, interpret, analyze, evaluate, recommend, and justify. The curriculum literally expects you to do all of this in complex case studies. So ask yourself honestly right now, are your current study habits truly preparing you to apply this knowledge, or are you just passively reading it? Let that question guide your final 30 days. Good luck with your preparation, you've got this.